Welcome back. Today we're going to do a deep dive and review on Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. This game was developed by Machine Games and published by Bethesda and released on December 9th of 2024. Now most of the time I save that juicy review score till the end so you have something to hang on to. But I'm going to do things a little bit differently here with Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I'm going to put my score out there first. I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10. Now, a lot of people think this is blasphemous, especially since I had fun with it. They're going to hang up, they're going to say bye-bye, and they're going to get out of here. But you know what? I'm going to lay it all out for you on why I think this game is an awesome game, a great experience, but not a well-refined or well-polished product. Now, for the sake of full disclosure, there was a little bit of a snafu that I found annoying with the release of this game. I'd pre-ordered the collector's edition from Bethesda, and it was late. So I basically paid for a little bit of early access, and I wasn't able to do that because of shipping issues. Now, they did send me a code the next day I was working, so I was pretty annoyed with that, but once I got into the game, I had fun. So, while that was an overhanging issue, it did not affect or impact my overall score of the game. Another factor to take into consideration that did impact my review score is that I prefer gameplay over story. And while I enjoy a good narrative, if the gameplay is lacking, if it's shallow, then I'm not going to enjoy the game quite as much. Personally, I felt like this game delivered in droves with story, immersion, and environment, but the combat overall was lacking. Now, there was great aspects about the combat. Like punching felt very crunchy, but there was a lot of different glitches and bugs that I ran into that impacted my overall enjoyment of the story. So without further ado, let's dive in deep and explore, if you will, the factors that contributed to my overall score. First, we're going to start with the positive aspects. What made this game fun, immersive, and an overall good experience? Now, personally, one of the best aspects I found about this game, especially in the first-person perspective, was the melee combat. It was brutal, it was crunchy, it felt good to punch someone in the face. Come up behind him, grab him, punch him right in the face, watch that spit fly up, and then knock him out. For the most part, scuffling in the streets with the neighborhood yahoos was fun, and slinging them meat hooks around, knocking dudes out, felt pretty damn good. However, once you got into the underground boxing rings, they felt like pea shooters. Punching dudes had a lot less of an impact. Now, I know this is supposed to be meant as a challenge, but the difference in power levels was staggering. Now, in addition to those fisticuffs, you could also pick up tools and put some indents in some dudes' heads. This included hammers, sledgehammers, batons, and other objects. You could even flip your weapon around, trip up a dude, and bash his friggin' skull in. Another great aspect of the melee combat was the semi-destructiveness of objects in the environment. Say a dude sat down in a chair, you'd come around a corner, punch him in the face, hit him with an object, and it would break the chair and it would collapse underneath him. And I thought that was a pretty cool aspect. It was more than just that. There were fire pits, you could knock them over lights. If there was a table in the environment, a wooden table, you could punch them and they would fall through it. It's just a really cool aspect to add to that melee game. For the moment, we're going to ignore the fact that the other dude is simply waiting in line to get his ass kicked, instead of helping out his buddy by teaming up and taking me out. We'll go over that garbage AI later. But for the most part, the melee combat was super crunchy, super fun, especially in that first-person perspective. Now, another great thing that they added that increased the overall experience, especially with melee combat, was the use of Indy's whip. You could use it to make an enemy stagger and fall off a really high place, or you could use it to traverse an environment. So you got a gap between you and an enemy. You could swing across with your whip and get your baton out and start going to town on this guy. Stagger him a little bit, let him linger, and then straight up knock him the fuck out! But the whip had far more applications in combat. Very infrequently, you could use it to knock an enemy out by hitting him with it. But more often, you could disarm them or stagger them. You could also hold it down and pull the enemies toward you to get them into close combat. Just straight up grab them by the chest and hockey punch them in the face and knock them out. One of the issues with the whip is that it felt very inconsistent. Sometimes you could use it to basically traverse a mountain. Other times it would be really sensitive and it wouldn't let you hook onto objects that were actually really close. I also didn't like how it looked kind of like a spongy bungee cord whenever he was done using it in third person, kind of reeled itself in like a self-retracting bungee cord whip.
Now the best parts of this game are the storytelling and immersion. It puts you right in the boots of Indiana Jones on a globe-trotting adventure. There's definitely a dusting of nostalgia and bits of inspiration sprinkled in from the original trilogy, but overall it tells its own story, its own unique story, and it tells it well. This story rivals those of the original trilogy. I'm not gonna lie though, at the very end there were moments that did not sit well with me, that didn't flow well, that felt kind of Paw Patrol-y, if you will. But overall, the overarching narrative was really great. The side missions in this game were incredible, and they rank among the best of, well, any game that I've played before. With the exception of trying to 100% the game and get all the collectibles, the side missions themselves did not feel tedious in the least bit. They added to and enriched the story, and they were a lot of fun. Whether it was fighting Nazis above the stand, or fighting a Nazi in the spotlight below the Great Sphinx, it was a great time. More than once I felt like I was Indiana Jones, and I was fighting Nazis, and I was exploring places that hadn't been visited in thousands of years, and it was absolutely an incredible experience. Unrivaled in my opinion as far as narratives go. I managed to capture one of my favorite scenes of all time in this game, and it's right here. It felt like I was in a murder mystery movie where you see the shadow striking. Indiana Jones in the Great Circle has all the standard progress-based achievements that you'll find in any other game, but it also boasts a few unique achievements of its own. Apple a day keeps the doctor away! Not for these guys anyway. But the achievements that stuck out for me were, as you just saw, throwing an apple at an enemy, or knocking them out with a fly swatter, and the third one that stuck out to me was knocking an enemy out with a guitar. I thought it was really fun, really unique achievements, and I like when developers use these and have you work towards something more fun. And now we're going to get into one of my absolute favorite parts of the game, and that's the use of explosive devices. Throughout the game, you're going to find bits of dynamite scattered around, and you can use these, ignite it, throw it at a group of enemies, and take them out. And the ragdoll effects, I find, are hilarious and entertaining. And I spent so much time on this game finding these sticks of dynamite and using them to just blast my enemies into straight up oblivion. Here you see a group of them gaggled up. Look at this. Boom. Flying. And it took all of them out. And this also leads into the amazing sound design that you'll find in this game. Just the explosions, the punching, and oh my god, that guy went flying. They got double blasted. And just the gunfire, even the gunfire sounds amazing. Just everything you do, the sound design is phenomenal. A cool feature is the dynamite will blow itself up. So if you set off one next to another one, it'll explode and just launch enemies if there are any around. Now another thing, I said explosive devices. We have these red barrels, and these are really fun to use, just the standard red barrels. If you use a stronger weapon like this bolt action rifle, it'll mostly take it out in a single shot without any delay. However, if you're using a more or less powerful weapon like a revolver, or you're a further distance away, you'll shoot the shot, it'll ignite it, and then it'll explode them and launch them into objects. Now you probably won't be able to ascertain this from my style of play, especially in this video, but Indiana Jones in the Great Circle heavily discourages the use of brute force and guns in combat. It really encourages stealthy gameplay, sneaking up on enemies, taking them out one by one. As you can see, I did not do that, and the cool thing about this game is it allows you the agency to play like I did, to run up to enemies, to shoot them from afar, attract as many as you can, and then try to take them all out. I died a lot, don't get me wrong, but there are moments of greatness to be found in this game. I love when enemies get hit as they're jumping, they fall down, and I love the explosions, and I love picking up new guns and just taking enemies out. Now, as you can see, there's no way to reload ammunition on the guns that you pick up. I thought that was pretty cool concept, although it might be frustrating to some people. Once you pick up a gun and use all the ammo, it's done. Well, with the exception of you could turn it around and use it as a melee weapon, but sometimes that wasn't quite useful. Oh, look at that. Look at those conveniently placed explosive barrels. But that was really fun. Really great sequence right here. Now, it's time to move into darker territory. Now, we're 10 minutes deep into the review, and some of you are going to be like, what the hell? This guy is making this seem like a 10 out of 10 game. What problem could he have with it to lower it to a 6.5? We're going to go over that, okay? And it's not necessarily one particular thing or a few really powerful things that made me lower the score. It's a multitude or a plethora of small issues that made it seem like it was half-baked gameplay. Part of it is the atrocious AI. We're going to go over that in detail. Part of the problem stemmed from just the application of the first-person perspective. You're going to have depth perception issues. You're going to have issues with clipping into walls and stuff like that, and as well as issues of transitioning from first to third person, which happens quite a lot in this game. Now, there are also issues that I had with the combat itself, not necessarily the melee combat, but more so the weapon combat, and we'll go into detail, intricate detail, on how I felt the weapons were underpowered and undervalued, and impacted my overall enjoyment of the game. And there were also glitching issues, serious glitches that made progress difficult or impossible, and having to load back in previous saves, as well as issues with achievements that prevented me from 100%ing the game. Still waiting on a patch right now so that I can finish those 2 simple tasks and get that 100% achievement. Now, the best place to start with the issues or design flaws in the game is all the way back at the beginning. Here, as you can see, if you get too close to an NPC, they start to fade out of vision, to blur out, and to become nothing. If you push them too far, they end up clipping through the environment. Don't worry, we'll go over environmental clipping plenty later on. But I believe this kind of stems from the application of the first-person perspective. More or less, it's a camera angle issue where the camera is going beyond the limits of where a third-person perspective camera would go. Another issue is in the transition between third and first perspectives. There are a lot of glitches, a lot of issues that I ran into when doing so. Sometimes it would be an issue with opening a door. Sometimes it would be an issue with climbing down a ladder. I'd go down and then Indiana Jones would clip through the environment. Sometimes I would jump across a gap and he would just grab on randomly. I thought that was kind of a weird design flaw. Now, issues with the first-person perspective itself include depth perception. Look, Indy's walking on air, and that's because of the first-person camera angle. And also, when he squats down a little too far, in my opinion, and then he can jump a little too high without the use of his hands. Now, this part might be more graphical in nature as far as graphics are concerned, but Indiana Jones's hand right here kind of looks like one of those AI-generated photographs. The first-person perspective problem I ran into here was when I started to bandage Indy up. If you push the limits a little bit, go a little bit further, you can see that he's clipping through himself. Like his left arm disappears completely when you're applying a bandage, and it's kind of weird. As you can see in the uncontrollable first-person scenes, sometimes the objects in Indy's hand float. Happened with a lighter, and it happened with the breathing mask. One of the more significant issues with the perspective, and also with design, I would say, is the water. Here, because of the first-person perspective, the depth is just off. You can't really go up or down. Sometimes you're going to end up running into some glitches that are really visually unappealing. This is unedited footage. This is me just wigging out here, and I was just like, what the hell is going on? Another issue you're going to run into is with the water itself. Sometimes the game won't count it as there. Like I pick up this dude's body, I drop him in the water, you expect a splash, you expect him to kind of float down, but no, he just sinks to the bottom like there's nothing there. Sometimes the aforementioned perspective will create exploration issues as well. This is an area in Giza. I don't know if it's supposed to be accessible or not, but if you go straight on, you can't go in. You had to spin around like a dog and kind of stick my ass in first in order for it to work, which is kind of a design issue. Then there's also depth perception issue. Here I'm walking over an empty space of air that I should be able to fall down, but it wants me to engage the ladder, so as soon as I engage in the ladder, of course, I can go straight through. It also causes you to get stuck sometimes. Here I jumped into an area I wasn't supposed to go, trying to clamber up onto the ledge, but I end up getting stuck completely. And this, I think, has to do more with the perspective than the game design itself. As you can see, if I look down, Indy's legs are floating in the air, and there's nowhere for me to actually be standing, which tells me it's more of an issue with the first-person design than anything. Now, I promised to talk about environmental clipping, and here we go. Even Indiana Jones himself clips through the environment sometimes. Here, I meant to jump, the game didn't register it, fell down, and had to go through a little error process in order to get back up. Luckily, I didn't have to reset the game. Now, even if you want to attribute some of these issues I presented as isolated events or minor glitches, one of the most egregious examples of poor design in environmental clipping comes when you go to move the bodies of enemies. This was by far not an isolated event, and it happened throughout the course of the game. Every single level, every single time I knocked an enemy out near an object, either the enemy himself would glitch through the object, or both Indiana Jones and the enemy would glitch through the object. As previously mentioned, this game was designed to be a stealth action game with a heavy emphasis on remaining stealthy. In order to do so, you need to be able to move bodies. And for me, having this environmental clipping every single time you move a body near an object is a huge design flaw and a huge oversight. I'm no expert by any means, but it feels like it's a programming error, like a design flaw with the collision system. Here you have the enemy completely fall through the ground. Not a big deal, right? I don't have to worry about clipping through the environment to hide his body. He's just gone. Nobody's going to see him. But what happens if you're fighting an enemy and they end up clipping through an object? It'll give them an unfair advantage, like I can't punch this guy in the middle of a tree and he ends up killing me. Not only do enemies clip through the environment, but friendlies as well. Here, Gina's clipping through the bottom of the bus. In the next scene, she's going to be clipping through some ice. This isn't a huge deal, but sometimes it leads to a major bug, like we'll go over later. And a lot of people will think this is such a small aspect of the game, it's nothing to really get hung up on about, but it happens so consistently that it did affect my enjoyment of the game. I got stuck on it because it was so persistent in the gameplay. Another part of the problem was the enemies wouldn't really interact with the environment very well. Like here, I'm trying to throw this guy over the railing, but he ends up geeking out. Luckily, I got Gina there to save the day. I'll give him a few haymakers myself, but here she comes with the 1-2 punches and just disposes of him without any real effort. Badass. Here's some additional footage to support my theory about poor collision design and poor interactivity with the environment on behalf of the enemies in AI design. Here you got a couple enemies floating above the ground next to precarious ledge. It's pretty fun going up and pushing them off, sending them down to the deep, but as I said, floating becomes an issue. Here we got Floating Tim just hovering above the ground, kind of like Casper when he dances, you know, with Christina Ricci, just floating right there. Came back, he's still floating, and then we're gonna knock him out. Oh look, we got some physics with Casper. Knock him out. Here comes his buddy right through the door, just like Casper would himself. From here, we have a couple different places we can branch off to. We're going to talk about the inconsistencies of the game, and we're also going to talk about more design errors, more design issues that kind of felt almost like they were lazy or they took shortcuts in the design because it didn't work well, it didn't look good. But we're going to start off with inconsistencies in the game because that branch is a little bit smaller. Whereas the design things will go into AI and we'll go into just different aspects that made it feel like it wasn't quite
fully baked. In regards to inconsistencies, we'll start with enemy fall damage. Here, knocked him off from a pretty high ledge, took a few tumbles that would have knocked out a normal dude, but no, he gets back up. His buddy, the enemy AI in the background's like, alright, you're fine. Drink some water, take some Motrin, move out. This guy's like, no, I'm gonna go kick this box's ass. So I knock him out, punch him down, falls down, enemy doesn't care. Well, there we had a long fall. Here we have a short fall. It looks like it's gonna be long, but the dude ends up falling like 3 feet off the ledge and dies, which is pretty damn inconsistent, if you ask me. And then circling back, or swirling back, if you will, to where we talked about water physics. If you push an enemy from high up, they don't make a splash. They just act like they're hitting solid ground. For the most part, the firearms worked pretty well within the limitations that were set upon them by the programming anyway. But occasionally you'd run into a bug where you couldn't reload the weapon. The animation would keep going, but nothing would happen. Couldn't use it. Even if you threw it down, picked it back up, it would still do the same thing, so you'd have to load back in. Hit detection would be off occasionally as well. Enemy throws a rock, goes way over your head, and he tries to punch you from a few inches away, unable to do it, so you shoot him in the face with some haphazard blood spurts. Occasionally, ghost objects would wriggle their way into cutscenes, like Indiana Jones pooping out a pole there, or a little set of keys or something dangling around there in the right-hand corner that would kind of just interfere. Don't know how they got in the cutscenes, but they were there occasionally. Also, enemies would, from time to time, react the wrong way. You whip a dude and he falls backwards over the edge and falls off. I didn't like the shadows right here. I really love that scene I talked about earlier where it looked like a murder scene, but here, if you could tell, the gun is just completely in the wrong place. He's holding it like a, I don't know, like a bazooka, when it's really a rifle. You got the butt of the rifle hanging over. Really just off. I didn't like that. And occasionally you use the whip, which is supposed to scare off the dogs, but it wouldn't do its job, so you'd have to shoot at them. I did not like the fact that you couldn't kill dogs. I thought that was really stupid. I get you don't want to hurt animals, but come on, for crying out loud, they're trying to rip you apart. Also, if you observe an enemy in the distance, occasionally their frame rate would decrease and it would look kind of choppy. Then you also had whip climbing. If you held the left trigger and you're dangling from somewhere, you could climb up your whip like a rope. But sometimes it wouldn't detect a wall near you for a little bit, and it would just kind of get choppy, and in the end it would start to climb up the wall the normal way. Just a little bit immersion breaking right there. Now we're going to transition into talking more about those design issues or programming flaws that I mentioned earlier. We had talked about environmental clipping and collision detection. Here you can't kick any chickens, you just put your foot through them, whereas you can't really run into a goat because it has some sort of collision detection. Occasionally you will clip through walls and go in behind the map and you will end up getting stuck. We talked about getting stuck before, but this one is like behind anything that's supposed to actually be there, and the only way to get out is by going backwards and basically falling through the map. Just that looks more like an oversight. They missed something, but then you'll run into the second half of the game, the later levels, and you'll find more and more consistent design flaws. Like take this wall of flora, for example. Feels like they didn't even feel like texturing this thing. They're just like, fuck it, let's put in a GoldenEye style wall of trees that looks like a movie set. In fact, pretty sure this guy right here is the one that designed that set. One of the things that irritated me most about this game is how they programmed the firearms. They looked and sounded great, but for the most part they were highly ineffective. Sometimes it would take upward of 10 rounds in order to make an enemy stay down. Sometimes they would just absorb bullets, would barely flinch. Sometimes they'd get knocked down after you shot them in the face and get right back up like nothing happened. Indiana Jones would also occasionally make comments, and after you unloaded on a dude, he'd be like, have a nice sleep. And I'm like, motherfucker, I just pumped 18 rounds into this dude's head and neck. What do you mean have a nice sleep? That motherfucker is dead as fuck. And then to further make it feel like a PG movie, sometimes you'll have medics like here in Sukhotai that will run around and heal dudes. Doesn't matter what you do to them. If you shoot them in the face with a shotgun, if you blow them up, the medic will run around and heal them when you're not paying attention, and they'll just stand right back up like nothing happened. Like, dude, that dude should be missing half of his face. Have a nice nap.
And to expand even further on that complaint, they would treat helmets and even hats as fully bulletproof, full facial protective gear. Shot them in the face or the back of the head, underneath said helmet or hat, it would either bounce off or they'd just get right back up. And you're like, man, I just replaced that dude's brain cavity with hot lead. What do you mean he's getting back up? Of all the weapons that you could choose from, the most effective were Indy's revolver and the bolt-action rifle. They were capable of taking enemies out in one shot, unless of course you shot a helmeted enemy in the head. Now we're going to move on to story and plot. I know I said I love the story, it's a great story, but toward the end it starts to kind of fall apart, both gameplay wise and narratively speaking. Some things occur that don't make any sense, like a giant holding up a slab when he could be shot in the legs and moving very slow. And then sometimes something like this happens where you're going into a room, a fucking wall of water comes and washes you away, but you don't go anywhere, and you're just sitting there like, oh, okay, I guess I'm good.
I don't have any idea what was even supposed to happen there.
In addition to the slab scene that I mentioned earlier, where the giant clumsily bumbles about under a hail of gunfire in slow motion without getting hit, which is kind of ridiculous and might make you roll your eyes, the very ending I found pretty out there. Like a lot of stuff happens that shouldn't happen, a lot of scenes that don't make sense, like trying to stop a steering wheel from the front when a giant's using it. It just opens up the idea that maybe the end was slightly rushed. And this scene in particular contributed greatly to my feeling of that. You'll see it flash to Indy's fist like they had a whole level planned here, but they ended up cutting it out and forgot to take out that transition. I don't know, it was kind of weird, but here it is in slow motion so you can see it again. A few other things that I thought were kind of lazy in the design department. One of them involved a temple in Sukhothai. You used a spear and threw it into a mushroom to use it as a swinging point. That was pretty cool, but they repeated it one too many times. Here in Sukhothai, you'll see that one of the guys right here isn't even impaled by the spikes. He's just sitting there, maybe taking a break, taking a nap. However, when you go back to that area after progressing further through that level, you'll find that the guys are just standing there like wax figurines, props on a set. Like, okay, time to move out, guys. There is at least one game-breaking bug still present in Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. This one, I think, stems from Gina getting her head stuck in the ceiling of a cave. There are certain instances in the game that you're going to need an NPC to progress. In this case, you need to boost Gina up on a ledge so that she can shine a light or help pull you back up or something like that. For this one, you'll need to cross a certain predetermined threshold with Gina in order for a cutscene to trigger. But she puts up a lot of resistance. Now you can roll back a save, lose a few hours of progress so that maybe it resets it, or you can kind of strong arm her and push her around. She doesn't go very willingly. Sometimes she gets stuck in a corner, but if you get her across that threshold, if you get her to that point, the scene will trigger. It took me about 30 minutes and a few tries, whereas with a rollback, you might lose a few hours progress. So I just thought that was kind of half-baked right there. As of this recording, there are still a few bugs that may prevent you from being able to 100% complete the game. If you fail to turn in the radio frequencies to Gina before you depart Sukhothai, you won't be able to do so after. She'll appear at a random spot on the map, nowhere near a radio. You can drop them off, nothing will happen. Here, I tried to cheat the system by parking her right next to it. She accepted them, but then I wasn't able to interact with the map, interact with the radio or the boat, so I decided to reload my save. Now, another oversight that I ran across was the inability to climb ladders or perform actions while you were holding a weapon. Occasionally, I would see Indy strap the weapon across his back, climb up to the top, and it would just not be there. Most of the time, though, it fell whenever you were trying to climb up a ladder or something like that. So I devised a method in order to get my weapons where I want them by throwing it up the ladder. Sometimes you'll hit people in the face, sometimes you'll attract enemy attention. But if you want to keep your weapon, it's a good way to do so. This, I thought, was one of the most hilarious things ever, where Gina's asking for a torch. I mean, what did she expect to happen? Oh, no big deal, whatever. And now we'll move on to our final criticism, which is the biggest criticism I have of this game, and that is the AI. The enemy AI is absolutely atrocious. Here in this scene, this may have been caused by a glitch
But these guys aren't even aware that I'm there. He sees me, but he doesn't blow his whistle, and then he forgets about me. This happens more often than you would think in this game, even though this might be one of those rare glitches that happens. Other than that though, the enemy AI is perhaps the dumbest AI that I have seen in a long time. If you're at the top of a ladder with a rifle, they will continue to line up and try to climb the ladder. Guys just standing there waiting to get shot. There's this guy right here. It's like, hey, look at me. I'm gonna stand here. And this other guy's like, oh, I'm gonna make it this time, I swear. Boom. Shot in the face and dead. This happens so often in this game. It's ridiculous. I have seen plenty of other criticisms on the stupidity of enemy AI in other games. Take Starfield, for example. A lot of people don't think the enemy AI is all that great. They do take cover, they shoot back at you, they kind of move on you, but not as well as other games. Here, the enemies have absolutely zero tactical awareness whatsoever. They will climb down the ladder in order to hit a guy who's holding a gun, pointing it at them, and they'll just keep coming. No situational awareness, no spatial awareness, no care in the world. I mean, after all, they're just getting knocked out by these guns anyway. But look, just keep coming. Whatever, man. Enemy AI is absolute garbage. And it's not, I mean, sometimes they'll try to avoid gunfire, but the way they do so is just absolutely stupid. Like, I'm gonna lean my head toward the wall so you can't shoot. Oh, can't shoot my head, can't shoot my head. Oh, yeah, you're dead, buddy, sorry. Not only is the enemy AI absolutely atrocious, but the friendly AI is garbage. I like Gina as a character, but god damn it, woman, if you keep walking my way, preventing me from shooting these Nazis, because it'll stop you from shooting if she gets in your crosshairs, then I'm gonna fucking lose it. She not only does that, but she'll pick up your weapons, she'll steal them so that you can't use them and you end up getting killed. What do you get when you put together dumb enemy AI and dumb friendly AI? Well, you have the boss fights in Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Look at Gina just prancing around like a weirdo right in the middle of our fight. Punches dude in the face a couple times. She throws something liquidy at him and he gets mad and chases after her. So I have to bust out my gat, tell him to come after me a little bit, you know? What the hell is he doing? Is that like his version of the low ready? Fucking stupid, man. At least it only happens once in this game, you know, you don't really see it anymore. Oh, shit. Well, anyway, the movement of friendly and enemy AI is just so janky. Like, take Gina, for example, here again. She's walking over a bridge with holes in it like it's a normal bridge, when she should have been treating it like this set of boxes that she could have easily walked around. But some of the movement is just stiff and wonky. I mean, unless you really, really, really want to see a nun turn around and start twerking at you, then it's just kind of wonky. Despite all these flaws and all this lack of polish, I love the game. My issue comes with the fact that this is a AAA developed game, and it feels like it could have used maybe a few more months of polish in order to iron out these bugs, in order to get rid of all this clipping and stuff like that. Now, I'm not trying to really rain on anybody's parade, because I absolutely adore this game, but it could have used a few more months in the oven. Now, if you managed to stick around for the last half hour and listen to me complain about this game, I really appreciate you doing so. All that being said, though, I really adored this game. Despite the bugs, despite the issues, I had an absolute blast playing it. It was so fun to be put in the shoes of Indiana Jones and fight Nazis and explore. Such a great experience, so immersive, awesome. It is probably the best licensed IP I had played since GoldenEye, and I love GoldenEye. So this is a really great game. If you have to pay $70 for it, I say it's worth it. It's a great game, pick it up. If you want to use Game Pass, go for it, man. This game is awesome. Some things you might find shortcoming like I did, but overall, it was a genuinely awesome experience, and I highly recommend this game, despite my low score for it. And maybe you think I'm dumb or just batshit crazy for scoring this amazing game so low, but it is what it is.